Good evening, and thank you for joining us for this session on Networking 201, following up and staying in touch. My name is Jodi Hammer, and I'm the Career Services Specialist here at NPCA in our Global Reentry Program. And I'm excited to be here to talk to you about this today, especially given we recently hosted last week the career fair, which understandably we had quite a few issues with, technologically speaking, with something happening in at least affecting the larger platforms on Zoom's behalf. So it complicated things greatly, but from the responses we've gotten so far from RPCVs, a good majority were actually able to get in and find their way to employers and talk to them. So I'm very relieved to hear that. I think this topic now is very key because it's crucial to follow up after networking. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to actually we're going to cover, the agenda is going to include actually first a review of networking, why it's crucial, just very quickly, going through some of those basics that we went through actually in an earlier presentation. And then I'll refer you to that earlier one for additional assistance. You can always check those out on our Global Reentry playlist, which is on the YouTube channel of NPCA. And I am joined by my colleague, Danielle, who's behind the scenes, who is very graciously helping with the back end of this. So she's going to try to, I think, put into there that link. Thank you, Danielle. If you can put the link to the playlist, the Global Reentry webinar, the playlist, that would be great. And it also can be found if anyone goes onto our website, peacecorpsconnect.org, and you go into the, for returned volunteers, like the services for returned volunteers, and you get to the careers page. You can also get to it that way. So that is where we have all of our webinars. And so you can always look at any of those. Okay. So we'll talk a little bit, we'll review, and then we'll be talking about how to continue networking and really how to follow up and stay connected after you've made that initial connection, and how that's so important to you in terms of growing your network, right? And I always think of the network as kind of your alliance or web, which I'm going to show you a different graphic on that as well. Your web of alliance, right, of people who know you or who've met you and you've interacted with professionally or what have you, that can kind of speak to your credibility and maybe be helpful to you in different ways, connecting you with people that you might want to connect with for possible jobs or whatever. Great. So today's job applicants, they basically hear about their jobs. Now, this is the source of this is JobVite's 2019 job seeker, their national survey that they did. So 50% heard about their jobs from a friend, 30% heard through professional networks, and 35% found job openings through social media. So, social media is great in so many ways, and it is good. You can find out about jobs and apply for them, but it's really, really helpful if you can network your way into, maybe you find one of those jobs online and that you can maybe connect with somebody who works there, because sometimes people, the employees of an organization actually get a bonus for referring somebody who gets hired. So that's a real incentive, right? Or at least can kind of maybe steer you in the right direction and help you, maybe potentially get to an interview, and from there, you obviously wow them with yourself. So that's just, I think, important to kind of realize that this is why networking is so important, right? It's people hear about things through others. I've heard some of the stats go as high as 80% with like networking, that's how getting a job. So in terms of, defining and redefining networking, I always talk about how, a lot of people think that networking is this like dirty word, right? It's slimy and it's just, oh, hey, trying to work the system. And it really isn't that, or doesn't have to be that, right? You can really redefine it to think about more, the informal and formal ways of networking. It really is, building this like connection, right, with different people that might hear about opportunities you're interested in, and vice versa. It's a give and take. It's not just something for them to help you. It's really all about giving and taking and helping each other, right? And that's why some of your best friends in networking are going to be RPCVs, right? Your fellow RPCVs, because they want to help other RPCVs, right? They feel that bond. They're your family, if you will. The Peace Corps family is huge, 200 and some thousand alumni, which we're working very hard to connect with right now at NPCA to be able to share that information and be able to, help connect other people, because that's really where it's at, right? Wonderful. So let's go ahead and on to the next slide here, defining the hidden job market. I talk a lot about the hidden job market, and I refer to it as more like an iceberg, right? Only the tip of the iceberg is sticking out, right? It might be the top 25%, and then that huge amount, that's below the water. I That's the analogy I use, right? So the above the water ice, your iceberg, that is actually the visible job market. So those things that you find out about, in the visible job market, they might be posted online somewhere, right? USA jobs for government jobs, things like that, right? That's some percentage, but look at the amount that are, jobs that are never officially posted. And you do hear different stats up to 80%. I hear generally between 70 and 80% are never officially posted, like on external sources, right? On wherever, Idealist or Indeed, even though those are great, right? And they have some really great jobs. There are a lot of jobs that never even get posted. They're filled instead either through internal hires or through, networking and getting referrals from people, employee referrals, that kind of thing. So it is really important to be connected and to be well connected. And the bonus of that is far less competition, right? When it's not broadcast to the greater population, right? It's definitely more, there's less competition when you're getting in that way, so it can happen a lot easier and whatnot. So that's what I want to say about the hidden job market. And I apologize, I'm going really quickly through these because I want to leave as much time as possible to talk more about the follow up and, how to stay in touch, and then also answer your questions that you have maybe specific to this topic. So networking, the benefits, obviously it's huge from the job search aspect, right? But it alerts you to different opportunities. You might find out about different jobs or business opportunities or what have you. It also, brings you into and gives it can give you exposure, right? The job seeker, or maybe you're not even looking for a job yet. You still want to network a lot, because if and when you do want to, which chances are you will want to at some point, you want to have a strong network that can really help you get where you want to go. So it's very important to, and also for gaining exposure, whether you're a company that's like trying to get your business, some attention drawn to that, or really just working to build your professional and personal brand. It's key with that as well. And then it's all about relationships, right? I mean, that's what networking is. It's set relationships. It's people you've connected with in the past that hopefully you stay in touch with, so that you remain kind of on their, forefront, so you don't just drop off and 3 years later you find a job at their company and you reach out and you say, hey, how have you been? I'm looking for a job and I found this opportunity. Yeah, right. That's just not as genuine. I mean, as if you can, keep in touch and such, it's easier. So the other thing is, in your network, you're going to be surrounded by, like-minded people, and that's a real benefit as well. Your network probably has a lot of people who maybe believe in the same causes you believe in, right? Peace Corps volunteers, right? We believe in, peace and helping, and empowering, not enabling, but empowering people to help themselves, and some of those kinds of things. You might find, common causes, obviously, in different kinds of networking groups. It could be the environment, climate change. It could be health, global health types of, things, depending on what your interests are, right? And that's why you really want to delve into the networking, aspect and expand. So your traditional networking events, this slide talks about, career fairs, right? professional conferences, industry like events or mixers, right, where they'll have happy hours. Here in DC, I've always said to people, back pre-COVID, right, when COVID wasn't around, I always said to people, you could practically eat for free every night by going to different networking types of things that are around, right? There's a lot of them that are free. Certainly, some areas are going to have less and some are going to have more. DC just happens to have a ton. So, and a lot of the other big cities, right? But today's reality is not that in person, where you're going and you're there. It's virtual. That's the reality of today with COVID. So whether it's through a virtual career fair like um, last week, right? The Thursday one, if you were able to connect with them, and we are working hard to put you in touch with the ones that you weren't able to connect with. If there were certain ones that you really wanted to speak with and you want to share your information, be sure you do the survey and the follow-up evaluation and survey, because in there we have a Google form and we're having you share your name, your URL for your LinkedIn page, so that we could share that with them if you want. So that's what we're doing for that. And speaking of career fairs, I do want to alert folks of there is a different one this Friday, and it is going to be a fabulous one. This is the Sid Career Fair. It's the Society for International Development. And they're using the Brazen platform, which is really the gold standard in career fair technology. So it's going to be very smooth, and it should be extremely smooth, and there's even opportunities to have one-on-ones with the where you have to register in advance, and then you get you build your Brazen profile, and then that gets shared with different employers even. So it's amazing. And the people who are going to be there, that is the international development sector, and I know a majority of RPCVs are interested in working in international development, right? And these are not just jobs that are located here in Washington. There's some from all over, but there are including international opportunities, I believe, as well. So that event is it starts at 10 a.m. and they have a really a great schedule. They're going to have some panel discussions. They're going to have flash mentoring available. If you want somebody to look at your resume, or you have a couple questions, they have that available. Lots of great things. And there's going to be most of the big players in international development are going to be there. So it's going to be a great event. And I would just steer you we are getting free admission. They're giving RPCVs free admission, which is great. So you don't have to pay to get in. You do need to go through our events calendar. And Friday, by the way, is the 5th of February, right? The 5th, I believe. Yes. It's this Friday. And you need to go through our events calendar, which Danielle, if you can dump in there the peacecorpsconnect.org/events. That's to our events calendar. And maybe Danielle, if you can, great. If you could maybe dump in the direct link to the to register for the career fair one. What you need to do to get the coupon code, because we did have to hide it. We can't just have it out there for mass consumption. It's meant for RPCVs. So you just register on our event page, and then the auto-generated message says, here's the coupon code to register. Use this email and register now using this coupon code. So that's how it works. And then you do have to register with Sid. Registering, saying attending to our event does not make you registered for their event. It's just to get the coupon code. Okay. So I hope that makes sense there. So yes, so this is, the traditional, the networking events, like following up on those kinds of events. Don't just go there and be the serial card collector, right? If you're going in person, right? Where you get all these cards and you have every good intention of following up, but you get home. And we've all done it. I've done it. I'm sure you've done it, right? It's very easy to just be like, oh yeah, I want to follow up. And then you just forget, and you lose steam and you just don't do it. But the follow-up is the most important part, right? And we'll talk about how you can follow up, what you can specifically say, things like that, and how to stay in touch, which is so important. Okay. Great. So always follow up. I mean, that's my advice, is to always follow up, right? You're obviously thanking them. If it was a career fair, for example, you're thanking them for talking with you. Thank you so much for visiting with me regarding opportunities at Chemonics International. I loved hearing more about whatever it is, right? You want to reference something that you talked about, and great if it's something unique, right? As mentioned, I am fluent in whatever, whatever language, or something that might be an unusual one that maybe would then stick with them. Like, oh yeah, that's right. So that can be helpful. Okay. And then you want to, reference, like I said, something in the conversation, ideally, that you talked about, or that made, that stuck out. Now, remember, they're going to have talked to many, many other people. And so that's why it's really important to try to get something maybe that's a little unique, if possible. And then if you do want more, time with them, or more, to chat a little more about them, maybe you could say, I'm wondering if you would be open to a follow-up conversation to hear a little more about your own experience and tips and advice you might have for someone such as myself, whatever, looking to, enter into the, international development field, or whatever. It could be that you maybe talked about a job that you'd be well qualified for. So then you say, I was thrilled to hear you say that the XYZ job might be a good fit for me. I've had a chance to review the description in detail, and I absolutely agree. I'm excited to apply for that, and will do so, to let them know what you're doing, right? So there's somebody that's kind of expecting, somebody they talked to, right? To apply. So that can be really, really helpful, right? And if you have questions, please, folks, I just want to make sure you can certainly dump them into the chat box. We have a pretty small crew here today, too. So I'm happy to take questions. If you prefer to just say the question, you could just put in the chat box, can I ask, verbally, and we'll let you do that as well. We're totally fine with that as well. Okay. Great. So let's talk a little bit about LinkedIn, because LinkedIn is, it really is the number one platform for professional connection, right? If you're going to be on any platform when you're doing a job search, let it be LinkedIn. Not even doing a job search. You're working professionally, right? It is by far the biggest one that's out there, right? 60 million plus users. They're in like 200 plus countries. It's almost everywhere, right? So it's a way to connect with, and you can connect with people. You can do searches by filter. Now, a lot of people talk to me about, do you need the advanced, right? That should I be paying for that as a job seeker? And my answer is generally no. Number one, you can usually get a 1 month free trial of premium. And if you really want to work the networks, and you have this time this month to really do that, do the advanced one, because then you have zero limits on how many searches you can do. So you can really, get a lot of those connections, from the get-go, right? Without any limits. With the normal, the basic free platform, you get a limited number. And I don't even know if anyone knows, you can certainly jump in the chat, but how many searches you can do on LinkedIn, the unpaid version, per whatever it is, per month or per, week. I don't know what it is, but there is some limit, right? So one of the things that Rhonda Anstead and myself, we do the Ask the Career Coach webinar, or not webinar, excuse me, podcasts, the first Wednesday of the month. By the way, this Wednesday is our next Ask the Career Coaches, and it will be conversation with her on whatever topics RPCVs want to talk about, want to ask about. So absolutely, submit if you have ideas for that. You can either, you can give them to me. You can just send them to, Jodi at rpcv.org. That's my shortened email. Danielle, if you can drop that in, that would be great. Jodi at rpcv.org. And just in the subject line, put question, career coach, ask, career coach question, or ask the career coach question, however you want to say it, right? That's great, because we will be covering those kind of questions on Wednesday. And we do that the first Wednesday of the month, as I said. So Thank you, Danielle, for putting those contacts, those links, direct links in there. So Rhonda and I talk a lot about ways to, like, neither of us are big promoters of, hey, go and pay that. It's not cheap. Like every month, it's a lot of money, right? I mean, for somebody who's unemployed, especially, right? So we talk about how you can oftentimes get around that, right? You by limiting the amount of searches you do, and the way that you can, or not following through to the very end directly. Let me explain. I'm sorry, it's a little confusing to try to explain it. So if you do like an advanced people search, right? So you go into the search little, like box, right? You're looking for someone, right? And you put in whatever it is, Peace Corps or whatever, the agency, whatever it is, and you find that. Then what should pop up is underneath that search bar are things like, do you want to search by filters, or do you want to search, and you can open the filters. The only ones you care about are going to be former employer and current employer. Okay. And in former employer, you are going to put Peace Corps. That's it. There's going to be lots of different Peace Corps ones that come up, but you want the agency one, the big, like the umbrella. You don't want the like Returned Peace Corps Volunteers of Washington, D.C. That's a great group, but you don't want that one for what I'm asking you to do, because you want to try to expand your search as much as possible. So you put in, Peace Corps as former employer, and then as current employer, put the company or companies that you're looking, right? Chemonics, whatever, right? Whatever whatever your companies that you're trying to find out about, Environmental Protection Agency, whatever it is, right? You put in there, and then it's going to, boom, generate that list of, there might be some first three contacts that come up where you're like, oh, I didn't realize they were working there. They must have just changed jobs, whatever, that kind of thing, right? So, and then you'll find a lot of the second degree through your friends and your contacts. There'll be second degree ones. Those are the ones that you're really trying to connect with, right? And then now what you want to do is not open up when you get that little listing. If it shows somebody as a second degree connection, you don't want to click on that there, because that then triggers the count against you, right, of your limit, if that makes sense. Instead, if you open up a separate like window and you go in and on your own, you search for that person's name and you've seen their profile pic, right, what it looks like, and you find them yourself, you won't get, I don't want to say dinged, but you won't get it won't count against you as one of your searches that you've done. So you can do little things like that. And there's a couple other tips that Rhonda gave when she did a webinar on, I think it was networking for people who hate networking, which was great, right? And quite a while ago, like if you look on our Global Reentry platform, they're organized with the most recent on top. So scroll all the way toward the bottom and you'll find some that have Rhonda. I know she mentioned that on a couple of her webinars, a couple of the other tricks that can help you as well, right? So that's just a few, but LinkedIn is a great platform to be on for that, regard, right? Now, if you're doing a job search and you're not, like, you're kind of doing it, you're sleuthing, you're not really broadcasting it. Maybe you're employed right now and you don't want your employer to know that you're necessarily looking for a job. You're probably not going to be broadcasting by, far and wide, hey, I'm looking for a new job, right? But you can still look on your LinkedIn, connections, and you should always be keeping that up to date anyway. So that's not going to give you away, right? The fact that you are, that you can update, and you don't even have to announce the updates to your connections, right? Like if you change your profile and you update it with a new, employer or whatever it is, you have that option usually, I think, of, do you want to alert your network or not? So that's another thing to think about there. Let's see here. Oh, okay. And Danielle says, for a standard free LinkedIn, the results will stop displaying at 1,000 profiles or 100 pages. Okay. And okay, then that's for the free. Okay, great. Good to know. Thanks so much. So then, yeah, the workarounds, we've already talked about that. Let's go ahead and go on a little bit more with the sleuthing for, working, worthwhile connections. You're trying to find them. You could do a lot of research on social media, right? LinkedIn in particular, but Facebook as well. One note about Facebook: don't be offended if you send an invite for connection on Facebook and somebody doesn't like add you. It doesn't mean that they don't like you or whatever, but some people keep Facebook a little more for their personal. I tend to do that actually, and then their LinkedIn a little more for their professional kinds of things. And so it certainly doesn't, like if I got to know somebody, through, I don't know, maybe we collaborated on something and whatever, yeah, I might, add them or agree to, coworkers agree to, have them on, my LinkedIn, or I'm sorry, on my Facebook. But generally, I keep that more to my, personal. And a lot of people tend to do that, I think. So um, let's let's talk a little bit about the context that what are the most like valuable ones in the job search, right? And then right now we're almost getting to the part where it's more on how do you follow up and how do you stay in touch, which are so vital in networking. So but first, to know like who are the most valuable contacts for you. Generally it's going to be people who are working in the field that you're interested in. So it might be it might be your job titles, or maybe one or two degrees above your own, so that you can kind of get a sense for what's the trajectory look like in this kind of field, and where might someone who comes in doing this go eventually, right? All of those kinds of things. So, and there are a lot of recruiters that are out there, and headhunters and all of that. And you can certainly connect with recruiters. The one thing that I say is I do not necessarily believe that you as an RPCV should have to pay for a like headhunter or recruiter. So I would definitely seek out those who are paid by the client, meaning they're the company that's looking to fill the position, not by you, because the last thing you want to do is start paying out money before you even get the job. So I think in general, I mean, maybe there's some exceptions in certain fields, but I think in general you should be able to find you should be able to find recruiters and such who are charging the client, not you. Okay, great. So let's talk. One more comment I did want to make on when you're talking about like networking, and this is, when you're doing, the career fair, or you're doing any kind of networking, you're sending your invitation on LinkedIn, you're meeting someone at some kind of a conference thing, whether it's virtual or in person, right? You don't want to necessarily come across as desperate, right? Like in this graphic here, right? You have the person that's like bending down, please, 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 job, I need a job. It's that desperation. You don't want to come across with that. And so a lot of the advice, and I'm going to link a couple different articles for you in the follow-up email that goes out that talk more about this as well. And they talk about, avoiding leading with your need, right, when networking for a job. So avoiding saying, I need a job. I'm looking for a job. I need a job, like that desperation, right? That can come across as that. And so instead you might phrase it as, I'm exploring opportunities in the whatever field, or I'm researching this field and, looking at if whether it might be a good fit for me, given my interests and proven XYZ skills. You can kind of come across less, excuse me, less needy, which can really help you. Awesome. All right. Any other questions so far? I'm just looking in the chat box. I don't see any, Danielle. I may have missed some, but I don't see any in there. So I'm going to just continue going. And I'm going to talk a little bit about following up after an initial meeting. So this could be, after a career fair, right? So, from meeting someone on, last Thursday, or it could help you for when you meet someone on Friday, if you go to the International Development Career Fair, if you participate in that. You might write that this is just kind of a template that, one of the sources, put out as, a sample, template for an email, right? Great meeting, the subject line, something that reminds them, right? Great meeting you at whatever the event was. That's going to help them with the context of who you are, right? And then in your body, definitely, and just a salutation, it was great to meet you at the RPCV Career Fair. I loved learning more about the opportunities in blah 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 blah, whatever. And then, what you're interested in hearing more about, right? Or maybe with them, you're interested in hearing more about them, like this example shows. And I'd love 15, 20 minutes of your time if you might be available to chat a little more about your own experience and tips and advice you might have for a job, someone such as myself looking to explore opportunities in blah blah blah, right? And then you can put out there what might work for you, right? And looking forward to keeping in touch. And then boom, that's it. Keep it pretty brief, right? um that can go a long way. I mean, that definitely shows your appreciation, all of that. But you want to whatever system you use for networking, I don't know, does anyone have on this, if anyone has like they feel a pretty good like system for recording networking contacts and maybe jobs they've applied for. I don't know if anyone does have that. I'd be curious to hear from you. Maybe you could just spend a few minutes talking about it. If what it looks like. I mean, it usually is some kind of an Excel spreadsheet, right? And it can be as simple as that, with columns for for the networking, who you met, where you met them, the date, what you talked about, obviously just little bullets of what kind of stuff you talked about, follow up, and so you can just really keep yourself organized, because I'm telling you, it is hard to stay organized. If any of you, I mean, when you're, whether you're in a in-person one or virtual, when you're at an in-person career fair, right, you come back with all these little cards and little notes, and you're like, oh wait, what was I supposed to follow up with, right? It's really hard. So you want to have some kind of a structure or platform to dump your information into, so you can have that. Does anyone have one that they did want to maybe chat about? You can unmute yourself. I can see you right now, who's unmuted, if anyone does want to. And no pressure, I'm not going to force it. But it can be, like I said, as simple as as an Excel spreadsheet, right? And when you're doing that for the jobs that you're applying for, do make sure that you also don't just link to the job description online, because what happens when they close that job description is half the time that job description comes down, so it's no longer there. So if you didn't copy that and copy and paste it into like a Word or a Google Doc and keep it in your, where you can link to it, and know what that job is, you're going to be sorry when they do, if and when they do call you and say, hey, we want to interview you for the marketing specialist position you applied for. And you're like, which job was that? Or you can't go back and even look at for preparing, and it doesn't really sound as good. I mean, if you have to do it, you have to do it, but it doesn't sound great to say, can you resend me that job description? It's much better if you have it and you can reference it. So hopefully that makes sense. So now, let's talk about when you don't hear back from this, because sometimes you don't hear back, right? Especially when maybe the recruiter gets inundated with a lot of different people who then are following up. So you can certainly, I would give it a little time, right? And then if you haven't heard back and it's been, if it's been, I mean, if it's been a week, clearly, I think you can follow up, and then, just say, I just wanted to, make sure you received my last message forwarded below for your convenience. I'm sure you're busy, and I, don't want to take, whatever, too much time, but would love to connect something, because they might have missed it. I mean, they are not the first person, right? They're not the first people to miss some correspondence, or it goes into their junk mail. I have that happen, where it goes into my spam, and I, don't remember to check that regularly, and then I find something and it's like, why was this in here? So it's those kinds of things that can happen too. So don't give up on them because they didn't. That said, you don't want to beat a dead horse. If you've followed up already, 3 times, you probably drop it at some point, right? And go on and try to find another contact that somehow can maybe give you information in that regard as well. Okay. I would also use the jobs, like the RPCV jobs, the COVID, all of those Facebook groups and the LinkedIn group. Like those are huge, right? There's a lot of people on there. Use those if you're saying, "Hey, I'm interested in learning more about the XYZ whatever area. I was trying to find a contact at fill in the blank, whatever the organization is. Anyone know anyone who works, for them that might be willing to chat for a few minutes, something like that. That's how you're gonna help. You're gonna give and take. You're gonna help when you can offer help. We're gonna talk about that on the next slide. You're gonna want to help people too. It's not just about everyone helping me get a job. It's about that give and take, right? So, all right. So let's go on to talk a little bit about your social network and your professional network, right? And how those can be here's some ways that you could stay in touch. So you've done the follow up, but then maybe you've even had a little bit more conversation with them, but then you're in the same situation. Like, how can I stay in touch, right? And it can sometimes feel very forced. Like, how am I going to do this? What am I going to do? So there's a lot of different suggestions, and one of the other articles that I'm going to share with you, is from one of my favorite sources, the Muse, and it's how to stay in touch without appearing not desperate. I forget, like without it being suspicious or seen as weird, right? So ways that you can stay in touch, part of it is just incorporating it into your daily habit, right? Staying in touch, so carving out, and this is something that I think I need to probably I do a better job of, right? Like just taking 15 minutes and just checking into and replying to when you see some of your contacts, maybe they got a new job or something, just to shoot a little thing saying, "Hey, congratulations, so happy for you," whatever. It helps you stay connected, right? And more up to date, right, on them, so that it doesn't seem so weird or so out of the blue when you reach out later at some point, and say, "Hey, it's been a while, how's the new job going?" Like you're more connected, you're more in the know of what's going on with them, right? And you can obviously find out a lot about what's going on with someone before you reach out to connect with them. If you don't remember what's been happening of late, take a look at their page, see what they've shared. If you're connected, right, see what they've shared. Oh my gosh, they've had a baby. Wow, whatever. Things like that that you can then say, "Goodness, I'm sure you've been busy with the new little one. How are things going?" Whatever. And you can make it more genuine and more like, "I care about you and I want to hear what's going on about you too," which I think is really important, right? So by making that 15 minutes per day to really do that, um looking through and responding to, and maybe doing a congratulatory message for something or whatever, that can really help you to stay in touch over the in the long run. Secondly, leveraging social media. So, like I said, LinkedIn, Twitter, all of those kinds of things. You can like, one thing that you can really do on LinkedIn that helps you with kind of building your brand and also being seen more as a maybe thought, leader, is posting articles that are maybe applicable to something in that group, on occasion, not every day, but on occasion. Maybe you come across as like, "Hey, I thought this was some really good advice on da 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 da, hope it helps," and people see your name next to that, and they appreciate, like, "Oh wow, cool, great article, thank you." So it gets you in touch with more people that you don't even know necessarily, right? And remember, if you're in the same group as somebody else, like you're maybe both in the RPCV LinkedIn group, you automatically, what's great is you have connection to them in terms of your when you reach out for a message, you're not limited with the number of characters as you are when you're reaching outside of your network, right? So that's nice. That's a little bonus as well. So definitely think about sharing those kinds of things, right? Articles and all of those kinds of things. Twitter too, you can really work that, as you wish also. So those are probably the two that people do more than others. But you can definitely stay connected and in touch with people and get them seeing your name in front of them too. The third one is a really interesting one. You can sign up for Google Alerts where you can say, like, you can put in keywords or key persons' names or whatever in there so that they'll send you a Google alert anytime there's activity, from that person or about that person. So it's cool because it allows you, let's say maybe one of your former bosses and you're kind of just keeping dibs on, maybe they're not on LinkedIn that much or whatever, but they were awarded some kind of, prestigious award, for you to go back. This is somebody who's a reference for you, right? For you to write them and say, hey, just wanted to congratulate you on the blah, blah, blah award. How wonderful. And of course, well deserved. Hope you're doing well. Things on this end are okay considering COVID and blah, 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 I'm whatever it is, like, you just keeping them abreast and keeping in the loop, if you will, and connected. So that can be an easy way to help in that. And then one of the other reasons that was discussed, or one of the other ways to stay in touch, are, knowing birthdays. And I know I have a friend who has always been like so amazing at birthdays, and she kept like a virtual calendar, and she was so good at checking it and like sending it out. She would always send, and it would always be there on time. And I was always like, wow, how do you do this? Like, that is like, she's a parent too. She has, I'm a parent. I have one child, she has three, and I'm like, how do you find time? But there's people who, with the birthdays and such, a quick, whether a card in the mail, like that's old school now, right? Like, that doesn't happen. People don't get birthday cards in the mail hardly anymore. A little bit, but not as much, right? It's all about, like maybe an email or happy birthday on your Facebook page, right? And that's really easy to do, and that's fine. But going above and beyond in some ways can be really nice as well, right? And people really appreciate that. Like, I really valued that about my friend. And, I just like, she is somebody like, that's such a, um, it's a big undertaking, and it's so thoughtful. Like, that is just something that has really been meaningful to me. So thinking of ways like that you can stay in touch without feeling like you're bothering them, right? Because you don't want to feel like you're bothering them. You don't want to bother them, period. But a lot of times we fear we're going to bother them, even when we're not, right? Even when they would like to maybe, hear from us or things like that. Um, so that's what I have for kind of more of the ways to stay in touch. Are there other ways that maybe some of you have used that you'd like to either drop in the chat box or unmute yourself and share? I'd love to hear. These are not the only ways. There's a lot of ways to stay in touch. I'd love to hear from you. Go ahead and drop anything in the chat box if you'd like, or unmute yourself. I'm looking right at the participants right now, and I can tell if you're unmuting. And I'm not going to force you. We have some crickets tonight. Okay, that's all right. If you decide that you want to share, you certainly can put it into the chat box. That's absolutely fine. At this point, I wanted to open it up to see if there were any questions, from anyone on, staying in touch, following up, any of those things, really any aspect. But in particular, tonight's, area where we're focusing on following up and staying in touch. So if you have any questions, please drop those in the chat box or unmute yourself. And we'll take any and all of those. We have about 12 minutes left, so we have plenty of time to answer some questions, or we'll finish early. All right. Andrew, if you are there, you are always so good with questions. Maybe you have a question, or would unmute yourself and share a question that you might have, or a comment, about another way to stay in touch. I'd be very open to it. And let's see, while you're thinking about that, Jane has written, thank you so much, Jane. This has been very helpful. Thank you. One question I have is, what if you follow up, but it has been a long stretch since you last reached out to the person? I think being genuine and, honest, right? I mean, if it has been a long time, we know how that goes. I mean, we all have probably friendships and contacts that have, taken the back burner in a certain period of time, or maybe it's, a networking type of contact and you just haven't been in touch, right? And now you're coming out of grad school and, you want to get back in touch. So certainly reaching out to just say, hey, just wanted to, reconnect with you. It's been a long time. I know it's been a crazy year for everyone and, something like that, right? But I'd love to reconnect. And I just was thinking about you and wondering what you were doing or whatever it is that you're trying to, work toward. See if you can engage them in the conversation and go from there. Maybe it's you're trying to get a job at their organization. So, in that case, I would say, goodness, it has been, such a long time. I can't believe time flies. And, with COVID and whatnot. And, we're looking now at next steps on, I'm in the market for a job and looking at some things. And one of the ones I'm very interested in is at blah, blah, blah. And, I'm wondering if you might have any insight into that particular department, or, in general, the organization. I'd love to hear any, thoughts or tips you might have. And that's fine. Sure, you're welcome. All right, any other ones?
Hi, Jodi, it's Andrew. How are you?
Hi, Andrew.
Yeah, I just wanted to share a couple things. I was trying to compile my thoughts, so thanks for the time.
Sure, thank you for being brave enough to share.
Sure. So yeah, one thing that I have been doing during these virtual career fairs, which obviously is different than going in person, but
Sure.
I've been using sticky notes. And so when I'm like talking with someone or learning about a position, like I'll just jot down like the person's name and then some
Yep.
information about the position or the department, and then I have like the sticky notes,
Yep.
like a pile of sticky notes, and then when I write up the follow-up email, I can just use that information and input it into the email. And then and then like sometimes they'll give you like a general email to follow up. So
Yep.
maybe it's like EPA. There's like a recruitment email that you would want to you like send your resume and so forth. So usually what I do is my technique is that when I write those emails to submit my resume, I just mention like the person's name that I talked to, and like I would say, oh, it was a pleasure talking to this person and this person about this position or about this and learning more about what you do or the department, and I'd like to submit my resume for consideration for blah blah blah, and
Great.
Thank you for your time. And
Exactly.
yeah.
No, that's awesome. Thank you, Andrew. That's great. I mean, and you find what works for you, right? For Andrew, he shared, having the sticky notes was helpful because then it's a different one for each one. And then presuming he doesn't lose any of them, right? He has them all together and he does it and he goes through and follows up, and that's awesome. Some other people might say, ooh, I would probably lose those. They'd like, whatever. I may need to use a notebook instead and just have, a line between each of the, people that you met. So whatever works for you. We're not trying to push one technique on you, but finding what works for you and just being sure to do it, right? Just following up. I mean, that's the biggest key, right? So thank you, Andrew. That was awesome. Great. Any other questions that are in the queue? I don't think there are any in the queue, but if we have any more, this is your last chance to ask questions before we wrap it up and say goodnight. So, and of course, you can always reach me as well at jodi@rpcv.org if you want to follow up individually on things. Okay. Great. Well, I'm glad you don't have any additional questions, Jane. That's great. And it looks like no one else does as well. So, that is absolutely fine. I think what I'll do is I'm going to shut the recording off here, and then I'll stay on for a few minutes if people do want to, if they do want to chat, that's fine too. And yeah, that'll work. Okay. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great